For the Unit 4 review, I'm going to have to break it into three separate videos. When I tried to have them all together as one, it wouldn't upload to YouTube because it was too large of a file. So I'll just simply label them Unit Review 1, 2, and 3. So please make sure you watch all three of them. Hi guys, we're already at the Unit 4 review, so this is going to be a really long video. Just a couple things before we get started on that. I hope some of you took a look at the design project for Unit 4 with the space vehicle. I sure wish we still had the robotics kits. Wouldn't that have been cool to have built a model using the kits based on what we would have designed? If you guys have some stuff kicking around that you could use for this around the colony, go right ahead and feel free to do it, or even build a cardboard model. Now, right before the unit review is the Unit 4 summary. Please make sure you go over that summary, because there's a lot of good information in there that might be good for a unit test. Hint, hint, hint. Okay, so make sure you go over that. Okay, so let's start on the review. Question number 1, describe some ways you could safely observe the image of the sun without looking at it directly. Okay, so we know that if we look into the sun directly with our eyes or through sunglasses, we can damage our retinas and go blind. Ways to observe the sun safely could include using a mirror chip to catch the sun's light and project it onto another surface. Use a telescope or a pair of binoculars pointed toward the sun with the lens casting the image onto a sheet of paper. Do not look through the telescope or the binoculars with your eyes. It will cause damage even quicker than looking at it directly with your eyes. My favorite version is using a pinhole apparatus that casts the image onto the back of a large box or container. So I've done this quite often in the past, especially for equinoxes. Take a thick sheet of paper, just put a little pinhole in the middle of it, and then hold another piece of paper farther back from it. It's amazing how good that actually turns out. You'll be surprised if you try it. Okay, question number 2. There are darker sections on the sun called sunspots. What are they? Sunspots are cooler spots on the sun's surface. They occur when the surface tears a bit because magnetic fields block out the heat of the sun. Some sunspots are larger than the Earth. Question number 3. Other than providing us with light so we can see, how else does the sun affect Earth? Okay, so the sun affects Earth in the following ways. It warms water, which evaporates, rises into the atmosphere, condenses, and falls back to Earth as rain. So it's a major component of the water cycle. Air becomes warm, begins to move. Hot air rises, causing wind. Just like air, water moves when it's warm, creating ocean currents. Sunlight provides energy for plants to make their own food. Plants are at the base of the food pyramid, so essentially the sun provides energy for all forms of life. So it's really important that you guys know those 4. Number 4, if it is light now where you live, where on Earth is it dark? Okay, so if it is light right now, we'd have to go to the opposite side of the world. So if it's light now, if we take a look at, say, Pakistan, Iran, those areas would be dark. Number 5, use the photo below to explain why we have warmer days in the summer than in the winter, even though the Earth is slightly closer to the sun in the winter. Okay, so if it's because the Earth's axis is tilted. In the summer, we receive more direct concentrated light from the sun, so the ground gets more solar energy. Number 6 asks, different cultures around the world have different explanations for some of the celestial events. Science is associated with Euro-Canadian culture. Pick one celestial event and describe 2 different cultural ways of explaining it. So I'll leave that up to you guys. There's lots of great examples in your book of those. 7. Why are there so many names for star patterns and the stories to explain those star patterns? Okay, it's human nature to try to explain what's going on in the world around us. So quite often, these stories are based on um, traditional beliefs of a group because there's so many different beliefs around the world. Each set of beliefs offer different explanations for star patterns. So quite often, we'll use names from the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans, or we may use names from other cultures throughout the world. It's quite interesting. A lot of the early astronomers were actually herders, so quite often herding cattle or sheep, and they're out in the middle of the night, sitting, laying on their backs, looking at the stars. Number 8 asks, describe the origins of the names of 3 constellations you have learned about in this unit. So, once again, it depends on what you researched. 9, how does science explain the currents of seasons on Earth? Okay, so we've kind of touched on this already. Seasons are caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis of rotation. In winter, when the North Pole is tilted away from the sun, the northern hemisphere receives fewer hours of sunlight. The sunlight is less concentrated and comes in at a low angle, so it's having to go through a lot of atmosphere before it actually hits the sun, or pardon me, hits the ground. In the summer, it's the exact opposite. The North Pole is tilted towards the sun. It gets 24 hours of sunlight during our summer. The northern hemisphere receives more hours of sunlight, and more more concentrated sunlight comes in from a higher angle. What uses do question number 10. What use do First Nations and Métis people have for star knowledge? Okay, so um, they had to know what was going on in their world around them. They had to be aware of the seasons at all time so they could get prepared for them. So the constellations would give them many indications of determining the time of year. So the appearance of certain constellations only show up at certain times of the year. Like everyone else, they would use them for navigation at night, and quite often they'd also use them for spiritual rituals. Number 11, draw and name the phases of the moon in the order you would see them over the course of a month. Okay, so the order of the lunar phases are the new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, third or last quarter, and waning crescent. Any of these phases can occur at the beginning of the month. So our lunar cycle isn't identical to our months that we have in the year. So it's depending on when a calendar month begins in relation to the lunar cycle. It could be any one of those. That's why sometimes we'll have what they call a blue moon. A blue moon is a second full moon that occurs in the same month. Question number 12. First Nations people did not use months to show passages of time. What did they use instead, and how did the First Nations name those passages of time? Like other cultures, the First Nations people used the cycles of the moon. The name of the moon cycles did vary depending on which First Nations group was naming them.